Welcome everyone through all time and space to an all-new episode of Weebs on the Weekends, a podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look at an anime that premiered 10 years ago. Today's episode is another special guest episode, and we'll be giving our thoughts on the 2012 anime Sword Art Online by Studio A1 Pictures. My name is Jay Johnson. I'm part-time weeb and full-time English language sensei, and with me, as always, is my co-host Sam Martinez, part-time weeb and full-time automail mechanic, aka a prostheticist. So, Sam, I wanted to talk a little bit about Doctor Strange again. Sorry.
Okay.
Because there was a lot of news by the writer of the movie that basically revealed some of the cameos that were dropped or were written out earlier in the scripting process of the movie. Have you heard any bits about this because it was big news this week?
No, I did not. I must have had my head in the sand earlier this week. But it would be very interesting to see if some of the rumors of having Tom Cruise as Superior Spider-Man, if they were valid or if they were off base.
All right, cool. So I'll drop a couple of the, they're not spoilers because it was early concept, and I'm sure our special guest has some thoughts about these as well. But so the one I really wanted to talk about is that the opening scene was actually scripted a different way, where they were going to put some focus on Baron Mordo from the previous Doctor Strange movie, where he actually comes after, slight spoilers, but he goes after Wanda Maximoff. So he's continuing his mission of draining magic.
No, that would have been great. That would have been great.
Okay,
Oh my goodness.
Sadness radiating
So
from this
much.
start.
Yes, I'm sorry. Continue.
All right, cool. So yeah, the scene was cut for, I'm assuming, reasons that he's going to come back and fulfill his storyline in the next Doctor Strange movie. But basically, the scene was written where Mordo goes after Wanda. She kills him, revealing that she's the villain of the film, of course. And then when Doctor Strange meets her, in movie time, about 10 minutes later, when the curtain gets pulled back that she's in this hellscape created by the Darkhold, Mordo's body is just there. So I was like, wow, that's an opening to the film. And the other...
No. Actually, like what you said, okay. So instead of seeing Mordo go there, it would have been great to see his body hanging, or not hanging on a tree, because that would be really racist, but at least have him posted there, or at least in plain view, right? To where we can see what happened to him. Because I had questions and they didn't answer them, and that would have answered one of my questions, and it would have been a very satisfying. It would have been a very satisfying scene.
Well, yeah. So the writer Walter Waldon made it clear that she beheads him. I don't know why he dropped that detail, but I guess because keeping with the Sam Raimi aesthetic of beheading people in his film. So that was the one piece of news I found most interesting. It would definitely kind of shape the movie for me. And the other one that I wanted to mention was that there was a lot more to cameos that were going to show up. So one was going to be Michael Fassbender as Magneto. Potentially playing Wanda's father from another multiverse. Another was Balder, taking the place of Thor in the multiverse. So Thor's older brother, Balder.
It would have been good to see that would have been a good character. At least having him with the other supers that we meet. Because I don't think we even met a Boulder in our main universe. So that would have been interesting. And
exactly.
I saw some tweet, I guess, again, it's just internet hearsay, where Ian McKellen, I think that's the name of the OG Magneto,
yes,
how he said that he would have been okay playing as Wanda's dad if given the chance.
I mean, a lot of those actors are really big fans of their property. So, again, Andrew Garfield coming back potentially for another Amazing Spider-Man movie. But the last cameo that was cut was Ghost Rider was supposed to appear and face Wanda.
Cage? Nick Cage? Oh, or yeah.
There was actually concept art that he talked about, not specifying which Ghost Rider it was, not Nick Cage or the previous
Hmm.
Ghost Rider incarnates. But basically, in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show, we actually see the Darkhold. No one watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so most people don't know that the Darkhold actually showed up in that series, and
Yeah.
Ghost Rider is put in charge of it. So it was kind of going to connect that to why uh, Ghost Rider goes after Wanda also. So it was going to be like a multiverse of madness hunting down Wanda, who was hunting down Doctor Strange and America Chavez. But anyways, those are the cameos. Any grand thoughts about that?
That would have made it into Wanda's movie even more so than what it kind of already was trying to be. Like you just muddy up even more of the water of like, is this actually about Doctor Strange? If if you go into like that Mordo fight at the start, or yeah, if you have Ghost Rider like chasing after her, um, yeah, I just feel like you change that movie even more than what it already is.
Oh my gosh, a stranger has appeared.
Oh my god,
Oh yeah.
a new
So
challenger.
yeah, challenger with. Oh yeah, who is your favorite Smash Brother character? Special guest.
Captain Falcon.
Oh, yes, I did ask you about this before. Yes. So Captain Falcon has appeared. Yes. So to introduce our special guest, it is a friend of ours from university. He's a beloved husband, a loyal father of two. He's a NA best dad. He is Mr. Eric Martinez. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much. Oh man, I've been excited to do this for quite a while.
Yeah, excited to
Was
have you because we're all, well, you're a little bit older than us. You're the Martinez Prime compared to Sam here. So just a little bit older. So I'm very interested to see your 9 anime takes that we asked our guests to talk about. But any lingering thoughts about these news droplets about Doctor Strange, Sam?
a little bit like what Eric was saying too, like going back to me recanting about that beginning fight. Like if we open up with the fight, then there's not really a big of a mystery or a big of a turn. I would say like I really liked the turn when we found out that Wanda was sort of the main antagonist, or at least like that was something that I didn't like. I thought about, but I didn't think that they were going to go in that direction. So like if when she had unveiled the landscape, seeing Mordo's body along with Ghost Rider's body, or at least like a Ghost Rider's body, changing in and out of that Ghost Rider form, right, but still imprisoned by Wanda, it would have definitely set a precedence as to what would happen later on in the film, because I know that a lot of people who aren't really familiar with her character, aside from the MCU, they see her do things that doesn't seem right or natural to them. But at least having her stand in front of the corpse of Ghost Rider and Mordo, it would definitely set that standard. It's like, oh, that's how bad she is. Okay. Like that sort of thing. And I feel like that would have made the movie that much more better.
Yeah. Eric, anything lastly to put about this before we go on to you about anime?
I love Michael Fassbender as a kind of young Magneto, but I am very glad that he did not come in like mixing.
Really?
Well, so the reason being because we had Patrick Stewart. If we didn't have Patrick Stewart and instead we had Michael Fassbender's Magneto, 100% I'm there. That's fine. That's a fun cameo.
Mm-hmm.
But because we got 90s X-Men cartoon Patrick Stewart, and then you take like Michael Fassbender and put those two in either the same scene or just even the same movie,
Yeah.
since we haven't like gone full scale multiversal war yet, that just kind of would have, I think that would have broken it a little too much for me as far as like how we're mixing and intertwining these multiverses.
That's fair. Because another bit that I just left out is that this movie was also featuring, or was going to feature Deadpool, but that was pulled from the
That would have
planning
been a little
stage.
much.
Yeah, it was pulled from the planning stage because it was actually pulled from Shang-Chi earlier this year. But yeah, Deadpool was actually supposed to be a cameo, slight cameo, in that fighting arena scene where Abomination shows up. And then that was supposed to connect over into this movie where you kind of get his full introduction.
I now you gave me a thought, because I was paying attention to some Marvel stuff, and we this could be a quick tangent, and we can go on to the anime. But I did see the trailer for the new She-Hulk show.
Yeah, yeah.
I am excited for it, because if you remember back in Shang-Chi, when Abomination shows up,
Yes.
we see Wong's portal, and then on the other side of Wong's portal, we see a same training ground that we see in She-Hulk's trailer. So I'm thinking that with She-Hulk, we're seeing her and some developments of the Thunderbolts, which is like a rehabilitation program for supervillains. But I
Hmm.
am very excited to see where we're going to go with that show.
Yeah, this stage of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is very wonky because I think we talked about this a little bit, but I made the suggestion that we might be heading towards the Secret Wars, and then you adding on to that might be the
Definitely.
Thunderbolts, and there's just so much to talk about given that we have Eternals drop with the Celestials, and then God Butcher and where that can go, and then Moon Knight, where can that go? But enough with non-anime things. So, Mr. Martinez Prime, you have 9 anime to talk about to define your taste in anime. Can you please share that with us so we know if you are going to be allowed on the podcast or not?
Oh man, yeah. I hope my 9 rank and allow me the honor to continue. Um, so top, and this is both taste and then it is my number one. Is Full Metal Alchemist, whether that be original series or Brotherhood. I mean, there's a reason my wife and I have alchemist circles on tattoos on our backs. And then Cowboy Bebop, my hero, the best DBZ could ever be, or the best Naruto could ever be. Ranking of Kings, which is the newest edition. Gundam Wing, Bakano. My cheat is Spirited Away, since I'm allowed. I was told I was allowed a movie from Miyazaki. Paranoia Agent and Darker Than Black.
All right,
Ooh.
awesome. Yeah. So, Sam, you actually have 3 in common with Eric here. You had Gundam Unicorn on your list, but he
Mm.
has Gundam Wing on his list, and you have Bakano. And what would have been the third one?
My hero.
My Hero. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Mm.
how do you feel about the rest of his list and that you share like 1/3 of your list with him?
I appreciate that he has ranking of kings there too, because like as it shows that he keeps up with the times, and he appreciates some good work. And I'm also very also appreciate his darker than black entry, because I feel as though that's more of an under the radar anime. I hadn't finished it,
Oh,
but I had
definitely.
started it, and I've been meaning to finish it. What I've seen, it has been good. And you have mentioned, Jay, Paranoia Agent. I hadn't finished it, but it seems pretty good, but like it seems very heavy. So I need to take my time with that. I approve. I would like to get your opinion, Martinez Prime, in regards to Gundam Wing. Though, is it just specifically Gundam Wing, or is it the Gundam franchise?
So I would normally say that it is the Gundam franchise, but I've only seen 3 of of the different Gundams, and basically, if it played on Cartoon Network over the past like 20-30 years, then that's the one that I've seen. So really, like Gundam Wing is just a all encompassing. There's big ass robots and they fight each other, and really just like beautiful anime goodness, I think is what that's representing, because that was my first introduction to that, which I'm sure for most people or most kids kind of growing up in the 90s, that they would say the same. Like Gundam Wing was probably their first introduction to the Gundam franchise if they weren't watching like the old series of it. And yeah, some of the like stills and screen caps of gun of the Gundams, they're just gorgeous. They were like the first things that I had like wallpapers and stuff on my old, good God, however long ago computer that would have been. But yeah,
Okay.
but honestly, like
Yeah.
I would say that's not even like a great Gundam series from I think I actually like G Gundam just for the more shonen-y aspect of it more than that.
Shining Finger.
Yes, dude. Man. So for Elder Scrolls, like you can,
Yes.
I think it was Morrowind. They released like like the creator tools, and I literally had a spell that will like go through his whole speech and then like kill somebody and then kill somebody. I love it.
That's awesome. Okay, but no, going back to Jay, I appreciate his taste, and this list is definitely a pass for me. But what about you? What are your thoughts on his list?
So it's very much a weird pick of a lot of not weirdness, but it's like this mishmash of things I enjoy, but I wouldn't put on my defining taste because they feel all not too similar. But like Paranoia Agent's the one that stands out the most to me because that's
Yeah.
by Satoshi Kon, who also directed like Perfect Blue and Paprika, Tokyo Godfather, and that kind of fills in
Tokyo Godfathers,
right? Underrated movie.
Oh my god, so underrated.
It is a thing that fills in the same spot as my love for Psychopaths, so it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, that just has like a little boy with a bat going around batting people, but whatever.
Just a serial batterist.
Yeah. Again, like, it's like one of those niche things. It's like, oh, here's like superheroes punching and kids training, and then there's like, oh, murder and psychological warfare, and like it's like a weird mix of things that you kind of know what kind of person Eric is looking at this list, which I very much enjoy thinking about why the 3x3 is so useful. Like you can do it with movies and books and music albums to really get a person's taste, but I definitely know what kind of person Eric is and or the things that he would enjoy, things I can recommend to him. It's like, oh, okay.
He enjoys shonen with a twinge of psychology.
100%. That is like, and one thing like Paranoia Agent, I was a little bit of a toss up between that and Monster for me, but Monster dragged on a little bit longer than I feel it needed to, but kind of the same thing. Like that is a dark commentary on humans and our psychology and I just that is I like to see people power up and defeat evil, but every now and then I would like to have my soul crushed by the darkness.
Yeah, Jonah still. I think the main villain's Jonah, right? Jonah. But yeah, he still ranks like one of the greatest villains of all times in manga and anime for a very particular reason. But I don't want to ruin that series if anyone hasn't seen it. But yeah, I definitely approve because it's like that youthful enjoyment of male fantasy escapism with a slight twinge of psychological damage of a world weary individual. So I'm like, yeah, I could be friends with Eric. Yeah, for that reason. So yeah, definitely approval from both of us. Yeah. So let's talk about actually, let's start somewhere else. Let's talk about something about 2012 because we are talking about Sword Art Online, and if we're going to say that there was an anime that defied the decade, I think it's easy to say that it was definitely Sword Art Online for its multiple installments and what it did for the genre, as well as like basically being the flagship of both Crunchyroll when it went public, as well as when Toonami came back in the West in 2013. So, sorry, there's just a lot to talk about here, and there's a bunch of video essays that dive into it way more than we can do in the next 90 minutes to 2 hours. So let's start off with something like just, personal. So, Mr. Martinez Prime, can you tell me a little bit about your anime and TV consumption in the year of our Lord 2012?
Yeah, this was tough. Like Google was my friend of kind of going back and trying to remember 10 years ago and like what I could possibly have been watching. But I was watching Arrow because that I think had either just come out in 2012 or 2011, and that was when I thought CW superhero shows were cool.
Yeah, that's back when they were cool. The first seasons.
Actually, yeah, that's true. Like the first couple of seasons of Arrow are actually like that is decent television before it goes like too off the walls. Once Upon a Time, that is probably because of a girlfriend. I don't think I would ever have watched that just on my own, but that was a really good show. Kuroko's Basket. That was I was definitely my crush. Liked that series, so I started watching that with her. Psychopaths. I know. Jay had mentioned that, and that almost made my nine because that is a great series. And always throughout the entirety of my life, I watch MASH reruns, whether it's on TV or I put it on, because MASH is one of the best TV shows of all time.
Gotcha, that's fair. It's long running and definitely dives into a lot of issues that aren't really talked about that openly anymore. But Sam, before I get to you about this, I wanted to give you at least a list of some of the shows and anime that premiered the year, so you know kind of where to gauge your if you were up to the cool kids watching the most recent stuff. But very much like Eric said, like Arrow premiered that year. Also, Gravity Falls.
Oh yes.
Newsroom, which was a very interesting HBO special or original. Dallas came back for like a reboot of that old, I think, 1970s series. Veep premiered its first season. Legend of Korra premiered, as well as Scandal, which was like the beginning of the Shonda Rhimes verse, whatever that proper name is. There was also, on the anime side of things, there was Kids on the Slope, which was the first production by Studio Mappa. So you kind of forget that Studio Mappa's basically 10 years old now, and they've done like works that we love, like just, anyways. But Cornell Basket, like Eric said, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Season 1, Psychopaths, of course, and we've already talked about another, and we're talking very soon in a couple of months about Magi, the Magic of the Labyrinth. So, Sam, how about your viewing habits in 2012?
I would say it was fairly similar to Eric Prime. I was watching Arrow when it came out, because I thought it was cool, and I'm glad that you mentioned Gravity Falls because I had forgotten that had came out, and I was definitely following that. I followed Sword Art when it came out. I think I knew about Black Dynamite, the animated version of the movie, but I don't know if I got into that a little bit later. Around this year was when I started really getting into anime, so I was essentially catching up. I was watching Korra, but I was watching older stuff like Blood Blockade around the time. I'm trying to think because I'm looking at the list right now and I'm just cringing. Well, not cringing, but just furious because I'm looking at Ultimate Spider-Man and I'm like, the year before, the Spectacular Spider-Man was so much better, and they canceled it for Ultimate, and I am angry. I'm mad. But the Nickelodeon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that show when it was completely CG, I was watching that one off and on. And as you mentioned, we're going to be talking about another one. I watched Excel World. I loved it. I'm trying to think. I might have been watching Supernatural at the time. As far as TV shows, I did watch Scandal a little bit because the black half of my household was entranced in it, and so I had to partake, and it wasn't too bad. But as far as TV shows, that's all that I can think about at the moment. What about you, Jay?
Yeah, just to carry over, like, so the ones I mentioned, of course, Legend of Korra, but yeah, this was my second year at university, so it was very much not in the mode. It was very much not in the mode of watching cable television. So things that I was dedicated to because it was a group activity was The Walking Dead, and in 2012 was
how did I forget that? Because we got to get
Walking Dead start.
2011 or tail end of 2010 and then into 2011.
But bro, every Sunday we got together. We got Papa John's. How did I forget this?
Dang, that is. Wait, how did we forget? Like the Zombie Liberation Front, I'm not representing.
Exactly. Oh my goodness.
Probably because that show, like, wow, that show went downhill. But oh man,
it's so long ago.
Good times.
Stole all my thunder about reminding you guys that we had a club that was.
Hey, I will never forget the Zombie Liberation Front. I still have the plan that we made somewhere.
Oh yeah. I think I'm definitely still on Facebook. I'm sure it's the last group I've ever messaged in, but yeah, it's definitely I'm still on Facebook and part of that group. But
never surrender, never forget.
Yeah, besides that was also season 2 of Game of Thrones premiered in 2012 as well.
Man.
So yeah, right.
I didn't hop on the Game of Thrones train until much later.
Right, but
I never hopped on, thank God.
Yeah, but it does
I
go.
would have been pissed.
Oh, of course, dedicating all that time to it, and I think that's why it's funny to talk about Game of Thrones and Sword Art Online in the same kind of way, because Game of Thrones dominated this decade and then ended really controversially, I guess. I don't know how you.
That's putting it very mildly.
Right, yeah. I haven't heard one person that really speaks highly of it, even when there was actually an orchestra performance for the last season that came to Mongolia. And it was very odd. Yeah, I was assigned to the House Stark section of that orchestra performance, and that was fun. But I've never been a Game of Thrones fan for the violence and gore and blood and all these things.
But speaking of talking about how it was a hallmark of the decade, it may be trying to do a resurgence because they have a prequel series called The Dance of Dragons that's coming out, and it seems like that's going to be a lot better than the last few seasons, because I think like they're going off of history that's already written from my understanding, so it's not like the writers have to make up something.
Because boy, they don't do a good job when that's the case.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a very weird year being 2022 because one, the prequel series for Game of Thrones is coming out, as well as another Lord of the Rings series is going to be dropping, given that it's its 20th anniversary this year of Fellowship. So, got things to talk about, and Sword Art Online is definitely a time capsule that we can delve into about is it good, which is a very deep conversation I have about 10 pages worth of answering yes or no, but that question we form as resurrect or rebury, if it's worth recommending to people or should it be left in the past. So just to start out talking about Sword Art Online, the time codes are going to be in the description below, where we're going to break it down into a couple of questions of what's good about it, what's bad about it, and I wanted to start off with just some background about the series proper. So, this is a story that's basically centered on quote-unquote 2 main characters, Kirito and Asuna, who have been trapped inside a virtual world of Sword Art Online, which is a virtual reality, massive multiplayer online role-playing video game. So it's basically a dungeon crawler, essentially, where they're tasked to clear 100 floors of this dungeon by the game's maker, and if you die in the game, you die for real. So that's kind of where that term kind of came from. You die in the game, you die for real. Or actually, I guess that goes back to Nightmare on Elm Street. You die in your dreams, you die in real life. Yeah,
and then resurrected with the Matrix, and just kind of continued on.
What about that one movie with Frankie Muniz, where they're all video gamers, and if their characters died, they died in real life? Am I the only one that watched that?
Yeah, probably.
That was a movie.
Interesting.
Hold on. I'll do some Google food to find it. I'll bring it back.
So this is a total of 25 episodes, where the first half of the first season is divided into the Aincrad arc, and the second half is called the Fairy Dance arc, also known as Alfheim. So it's a very interesting case where I actually didn't know that's how it was structured. I always remembered as Aincrad being the first season, and then the Fairy Dance arc being the second season. But that's how true.
That's how it felt here in the West.
Yeah, I thought I was the only one that remembered it that way. So I'm glad that was actually just kind of a common
misconception.
Yeah,
that was a common Mandela effect.
Mandela effect. Yeah.
I think it's again, it's probably because at the time I wasn't too savvy in how seasons were split up between like the East versus the West, And like over here,
Mm-hmm.
we the idea is like, the first season it all has the same intro, and then as soon as the intro changes, it's like, okay, now it's the next season, and everybody
Right.
over here is like, oh, when did you stop watching Sword Art? It's like, I just stopped before Alfheim, right? I didn't watch the fairies or anything else like that. So here in the West, like, that's how we talked about it. I never really spoke to anybody outside of the West that saw it differently. So
Right, yeah, and that kind of much had to do with the promotion of the property because again, it was the flagship of Crunchyroll, and Crunchyroll was very much pushing everyone to watch this at the time because one, the second season premiered in 2014, I believe, yeah, 2014, which was just called Sword Art Online 2, which covered the Gun Gale, Gun Gale,
yeah,
Gun Gale
Gun
arc.
Gale.
Yeah, Gun Gale Online.
Yeah, and then season 3, which is the most recent season, is divided into two parts: Alanization and then the War of the Underworld. So there's a lot to go into about this, but it's basically based off of the light novel series that started back in 2009 by Reki Kawahawa. Sorry, I'm getting his
Reki,
kanji wrong.
we'll just
Reki.
call him Reki.
Yeah, sorry, his kanji is kind of weird. Anyways, yeah, he self-published this back in 2002, and it's very odd
Oh, he's
because
a self-publish. Okay.
yeah, and then he got picked up by I forget which publishing company, but it was like hot material that they immediately basically turned into an anime, and then followed up with the sequel series in 2009 called Excel World, which also got an anime in the same year. So it's very a confluence of things that push Reki into the limelight. But oh, sorry, I'm thinking about what I want to say about this because what his series is basically is getting trapped in a video game, which is something like we know from Tron back in I think the 90s, no 80s. 80 Tron is 82. But yeah, but that is not like the origin of the trapped in a video game trope. We kind of talked about this during the Steingate episode when we covered time travel, where we all know that time travel was basically popularized with H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, but that's not where it was
Mm-hmm.
first ever incepted. The first inception of the time travel mechanic was back in almost like 20 years earlier, called the clock that goes backwards. So same thing with trapped in a video game. I mean, if you really want to go back to the beginning of that trope, you can kind of account it to Westworld, but when you actually really see it appear in media was Dream Park in 1981. So
Ooh.
Tron kind of just ripped off that idea and kind of popularized and standardized what we are to expect, and that's what Sword Art Online is.
Just to tack on to that point a little bit, I found the info of the movie that I mentioned earlier. It's called Stay Alive, and it came out in 2006. Just a brief summary. These friends, they go to their friend's funeral. He died on mysterious causes, and he was a game tester. And they knew him through school, and they played video games, had LAN parties, and so they somehow got a hold of the demo that he played, and they had a LAN party one night, and it turns out it was a horror game. And then throughout the movie, it turned out you couldn't turn it off. The game kept playing without you, and however your character died in the game, you died in real life. So it seemed like they tried to make a resurgence with this movie in the 2000s, but it didn't seem to take, it seems, from your reactions to my mentioning it. But it's a good movie, and it creeped me out at a good time when I was a gamer, and I liked it. So that's all I have to say.
So this is available on Crunchyroll. All the seasons are there, which is not surprising given that it was a flagship back in the day. But I do have a very, just a baseline question of, does this feel too similar to other animes that you've seen in the past? I'm thinking about specifically Log Horizon, dot the hash
Dot
slash
hack.
dot hack
Dot
series,
Dog hack
dot hack,
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
backslash blah blah blah, and anything else.
Mhm,
There's also
mhm.
like most recently like MMO Junkie, King's Avatar. I maxed out my defenses, even Konosuba, which is oddly falls into this category of sci-fi, adventure, and video game aesthetic. So, does it feel like Sword Art Online vibes with those particularly? Right?
I've never watched a single one of those. Maybe I watched like a few episodes of Dot Hack, but it's
Konosuba though.
I don't. No, nothing.
Okay.
I got nothing for you. But the thing is that to me this is just like a classic isekai, and this is probably the first one that I watched that I would like classify as that. I don't think I even knew what that. Actually, no, I can guarantee you, I had no idea what that term meant.
Inuyasha, though.
But I don't think of that one though. Like you're 100% right. Like, but I don't remember that being a term thrown around for Inuyasha. It was just a fantasy, like a fantasy version of ancient Japan. So, but yeah, I'm sure like these things existed before Sword Art Online. It's just I don't think they were talked about in exactly the same way until this came out. And when it comes to like a Dot Hack, because at least I've seen some of that. Yeah, there's that vibe there, but Dot Hack did a lot more to gamify what was going on. This is honestly, if you didn't pull up a menu every now and then, or you didn't see a health bar,
you would forget that he's in the game.
Yeah, I'd be like, all right, yeah, it's just another fantasy anime. Like, who cares? There's nothing actually tying him into a video game most of the time until the second half of the season when he can take the bank, when he can log out.
Like, it's not even classified by its genre as an isekai, even though, again, spoilers in the description of it is that season 1 does already tell you how the first half of the season resolves itself, is that they get out. And the main push of the second half is that Asuna is still trapped in a version of the same game. But yeah, to say, we'll talk a little bit more about the game aspects of the series, but to go back to like why I asked that question is because this does fall into the category of virtual reality and fiction, and even the author of Ready Player One was developing the same idea at the same time. So same time period on across, two different writers across the planet developing this kind of the same similar idea of immersion inside this virtual world. So did you see the movie, Sam, of Ready Player One? I know you wanted to read the book.
I've been told that the book was better, but I've heard good things about both, and so now I'm at a standstill. I won't watch the movie because I want to read the book, but I haven't read the book because I have other books that I need to read, and I'm in the middle of those, and I don't want to finish it, but I'm being dumb. And if I consume one, it would spoil me to the other, so that's where I'm at.
Yeah, so I think that's good background on our experience with the virtual reality and fiction kind of genre. So to get into like the main bulk of our conversation, I wanted to ask, starting with you, Eric, how did you feel after the first 3 episodes? So again, the season is equally split between 2 different arcs because it's adapting from the light novel. So it has like a clear defined cut in the pacing of its action. So the 3 episode test does hold up. So did you feel motivated after watching the first 3 episodes to continue watching, or what was the lingering feeling that you had after the 3 episode test?
Man, the first 3 episodes of this series come in blazing hot. Mm-hmm. Like the promise of this premise is a gold mine, which is why they turned it into an anime, I'm sure. And those first 3 episodes are where we get all of it. I mean, like, you get your first boss battle in the 2nd episode. In the 3rd episode, we deal with, like, what does this actually mean that there are thousands of people trapped in a game, and if you die, you die. Like, just like the weight of that premise is how, like, the 3rd episode plays out, and so you're just like, you're pumped. You're like, man, I'm going to get all these epic boss battles. We're going to explore like this deep psychological effect of, hey, of these people trapped in this game. So after the first 3 episodes, oh, absolutely. Like I was sold. I was sold after episode 2, if not even just like the first episode. And then yeah, whether or not that continued on the series, I know we're going to get into. But definitely the first 3 episodes of this are peak anime with a great concept and a great execution on those ideas as well.
Right, because the first 3 episodes, what it does, again, testing if the 3 episode test actually holds up, is that first episode introduces you to the world, where we see that
Mm-hmm.
the year is 2022.
Tongue in
So,
cheek.
and yeah, tongue in cheek, especially now. But we don't really have a real world equivalent yet. I mean, we do have the Oculus Rift, of course, and we have like VR chat that kind of
Right.
does it, but we don't have a massive multiplayer yet. So that's probably coming up in a few years, but we haven't really cracked the haptic response yet. But the 3 episodes does do its job, at least from my standpoint specifically, because of the dread they sell you in the 3rd episode.
Yeah.
Because spoiler alert or trigger warning, there's suicide in this anime for kids.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. We had a conversation with another guest, Anandal, who will be talking about in our Corona Basket episode. And one of his on his 3x3 is Sword Art Online. And I think that's one of the positives of the show. Skipping ahead with one of my questions, but I think that we have to consider that this is actually a lot of people's first anime. And like Eric, you said, like this is probably the first time you kind of standardize the idea of what an isekai is, to transport it to another world kind of model. And as the 3 episodes like kind of wrap into each other, the idea of, oh, this guy comes out from the sky, he's a god, he's trapped people into this world, and the reason that he gives is that he wants to control their lives and see them play out kind of like ants inside of a box. And then in the 2nd episode, like it just opens up out of the, I think it's 10,000 people that are logged into the game at the moment. 2,000 of them die in the first month. I'm like, okay, cool anime for kids. Yeah, just kill off. What is that?
That's
20%.
Yeah, no, they decimated the population. That's a 10th.
So I think it's actually 8. I think it's 8,000. So it's a whole full quarter.
Yeah.
I think it. Did I write it in my notes? Well, whichever, a quarter or a fifth, like a serious portion of the population is just gone within a month.
Basically,
it's all off screen.
The game developer was like, "Get good."
Yeah, not to be insensitive about it, because treating them as real lives. But I wrote in my notes, Leroy Jenkins. With that episode, with the episode premiere, because I kind of forgot about the number, but that's a lot of people to die in the first month of a multiplayer. And
But they couldn't even find the first boss for what? The first
for that first month. Like that whole first month was spent even finding the first boss.
And I'll talk a little bit more about my experience with Elden Ring, kind of comparing that kind of search for how bosses are structured in an open world game. But Sam, how do you feel about these first 3 episodes? Did they do it for you, or where is your head about coming out of it?
No, I'm definitely there with Eric in that the first 3 episodes, it sells you a very, very good promise. I'll basically be saying the same thing he did. Like they did all of the cues very well. They showed you a little bit of the game mechanics. They showed you why Kirito was a little bit more experienced, but we still got to see him grow and develop a little bit, and we got to see how much of a menace the boss was, and how everybody was underleveled, and how they needed to work in tandem in order to beat him. And even when they beat the boss, just having to go 99 more levels, and how it affected the population to self-delete like that. Like it definitely takes a toll, and it's like, okay, let's see where this is going to go. And I think like that's why a lot of the people are as much of a fans of it as it was, because like you said, this was a beginning anime, and then you get sold the story, and then you don't really have any expectations up until that point if you hadn't seen any other anime. So whatever is next, you would think is just the next logical step.
Yeah, specifically about that is that, again, talking about what is a particular interesting selling point of Sword Art Online and why I would recommend it to people is that it has a strong sense of tonal structure, I guess. So even in that first boss battle, I think it's the boss name is Ilfang or something, but he does like somewhat of a jump scare. He like it's like very terrifying monster design, and in a game, you know, you're in a death game, and he's imposing as a first boss. He has minions that come out, and then switching to the third episode, you get even more tragedy. And sorry, I don't mean to laugh about the moonlit cats, but I do think it's kind of funny, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. But it is the sense
Goblin
that
Slayer before Goblin Slayer.
not even that bad. Goblin Slayer is pretty bad, but in this is because of you have an emotional connection to the characters. Because one, you get a sense of their desire not to die, but in Goblin Slayer, you're like, oh, their adventurers are kind of like they chose a life kind of sense. But in here, like there's strong tones of like comedy. There's like warm-heartedness between their interactions. You see that Kirito is a loner, but he's like doing his best to like relate to people. Again, much to the credit of some of the writing going on with his character, that he is a solo player, which doesn't really work in the context of a multimedia or massive multiplayer.
Definitely doesn't.
Right, yeah, and we can get more about your experience with that, Eric, later on, but I think a strong selling point of the show is that it has a clear directional or a direction to its flow of pacing and writing and its characterization. And like, there's small things, especially with that suicide scene. I was like, oh man, I didn't clap or anything, but it was like well shot. It has like the clear sense of cinematography and editing with the camera movement and like facial expressions, and like there's a lot of reflection work going on when Kirito is reading Sachi's or listening to her like last will and testament essentially. So it's like small things I was paying attention to, being dedicated to making sure I was seeking out the positive traits of the first 3 episodes. But let's go back to Sam. Do you have a prime selling point you recommend Sword Art Online that you want to talk about?
I would say I would say maybe give me some time, because I would say like when this first came out, as you said, this work along with Ready Player One, like they, even though they were on opposite sides of the planet, they realized how video gaming was catching on, right? So back in the 2010s, I would say, oh, hey, it's for us by us, you know, like it's for gamers by gamers, you know, that sort of thing. But like now, in today's day and age, since how overly saturated the pop culture is with video games and with anime. I mean, for instance, we had the NFL team, the Chargers, their release
Oh my
of
god, their schedule release video is so good.
Exactly. Like they did a scheduled release video, and it was all in anime themed. Like the different teams that they were going against, it was a different anime for each one. And it was like, oh my goodness, they know about the culture. How am I supposed to feel about that, right? Like that sort of thing. And as we had alluded to earlier, it's like with video gaming and MMOs, like they are now a little bit different, or they are now, the rules are now more well known. So to say that this game is for, or sorry, say that this anime is for gamers, I would be remiss in saying that. But I would say probably a good selling point with would be what you had said earlier, Jay, and that it is consistent tonally and with the characters that you are supposed to feel for, you do get a strong emotional tie to. So it's good in the paint by numbers sort of thing, where it's like it's good structurally, even though you may see what's going to happen next, it's still done in a good format. So I would say that would be a good selling point if you wanted to try and get into try to have this. It's a good starting anime, I would say.
All right, good. And so I'll hold off on my 2 pages of positives to talk about this. But yeah, Eric, how do you feel about a selling point? Like, how would you get someone onto the SAO hype train?
Sam kind of hit it on the head. This is a great starter because they have it split to where like Aincrad is the first half-ish. It goes a little bit over half, I think. But because of that, it is a good starter because there's so much that gets condensed into like the first like 13 episodes. Because they have to do this whole entire game clear and in that time span, and I'm sure that we're going to talk about how that's not enough time to really like delve into a lot of the promises that they make. There's so much packed in there that yeah, you can get a good sense of what this genre is about, and even kind of like some of the typical anime tropes that you might find with, you know, like how main characters are portrayed and in their struggles, and how their characters quote unquote develop. So I think that was probably the same kind of point that I would try and go with, is that it is a great starter, and just like Jay, just like you had mentioned earlier, like this is a lot of people's start to anime, was this series, and you could certainly do worse. Like you can certainly do worse than an SAO as your first anime.
Let me push up my glasses so I can start talking about everything great about SAO. So that would be my video essay title. So obviously, I agree with everything that you both said, and tackle on some other positives, in my opinion, and see if you guys feel the same way. But I very much like the plot variety in at least the first 12 episodes. That it goes from like this high concept of, you know, bleeding from the sky, an overlord comes down and introduces these death game rules to a very unexpected audience. Oh, I'm not playing Mario Kart, now I'm playing Mario Kart Death Race. Kind of feel to it.
Your daddy's Final Fantasy kid.
Right, exactly. And then it does transition into like the tragedy with the Moonlit Cats, then it transitions into like this very moe escort mission, then it transitions into a murder mystery, then it transitions into like a gathering kind of quest mission. So I thought it was very interesting to the role-playing aspect that you kind of gear yourself into with like RPGs, is that you literally can do anything. So whatever you're doing activity-wise is always going to be variety, because in like episode 11 there's like this dude just fishing, and even though that's like a very much a downplayed in like the overarching story, it's like showing off, oh yeah, you can just fish in this world and no one's going to bother you. And that's kind of the appeal of SAO as like a kind of a first anime, is that you can see yourself living in this world, and that's kind of appealing as well. So I think plot diversity or variation is like a strong positives I can recommend to other people. Let's go to, I think it's completely bingeable. That it has a lot of forward momentum to it, where like the action, like there's like good structured action every 3 to 4 episodes, I guess. Like there's like a highlighted fight. The fighting scenes are like well choreographed, and I really don't like the phrase like turn off your mind, but it's very chilled watching. Like it's just like very lighthearted and nothing too challenging, but it's just like relaxing entertainment. And so I'm not getting on a soapbox. I'm going to just finish off with this point that what I really liked about SAO, at least in the first half, was that the boy gets the girl. And I know that seems like a very, very weird positive, but like if you're used to the shonen tropes of this ambiguous romance, or the boys kind of seeming like not necessarily asexual, just there's no progression in any direction with the female counterpart, but Kirito gets the girl. He gets her
early on, technically.
Yeah, in episode 10 is when they sleep together. and they sleep together also, but it's off screen. But but yeah, we're into that section. But yeah, it's kind of endearing in the sense that the main two characters hook up, and that changes the dynamic going forward for like her sacrifice near the end or in the middle of the season, and then how he kind of opens himself up completely to another person and relies upon them. It's like really heartwarming and mostly satisfying. So if I was going to put like a big star next to why I would recommend it, is like a shonen protagonist actually gets laid. And it's like, yeah, cool. That's
But
what I've
is he
been
though?
waiting
It's
for.
still all virtual.
Yeah, because for now, yeah. But
Splitting hairs.
yeah, those are my high points. But apparently, I'm the only one that has strong feelings that SAO has some good qualities to it. But let's.
Now that I take that variety a little bit as a negative, just because we can't sit in it. But honestly, Jay, like the way that you explain that, like no, that is 100% a positive. Because just like you said, like this is still an RPG, and you have to have varied quests. They can't all just be go kill 10 wolves, go kill 10 slimes. Like you need to have some variety there to actually keep people interested. So you were 100% right that like that variety that we see in Aincrad is a huge positive because you can get these different quests. I think that they might fail a little bit on just I guess for me, and because we have the different view of that coming into this conversation, I think is just a testament to the writing not always capturing that idea. But I know that we're going to get into the quest structure later on. But I see where you're coming from, and honestly, I didn't even think about the fact that he gets the girl, but that is actually huge, and their relationship is actually I think well done in this series. Like it seems natural. It seems it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like a lot of times in shonen, like that chemistry or that relationship is just so forced. And here it makes sense and you believe it. Um, so all right, you sold me. Variety is actually a huge positive and is a good selling point of this.
Hey, cool! I did my job.
I have some qualms, I guess, like a little bit being personal, because when you mentioned the fishing when I first watched it, I have some emotional scars, and being forced to fish in a game where I'm supposed to go fast, speed, and go, like in Sonic Adventure 1. I have emotional scars being forced to play as Big so I can get like the final ending, and I couldn't get the final ending because I had to fish in a game where I had to go fast. So when that episode first showed up, I'm like, oh fuck this shit. Like I hate this. But like I do I and along with that, like I do agree with Eric, like you said, like the variety, like it also shows it's also great for a starter anime because you get to see what all anime can be and just all the slice of lifeiness.
Right.
I disliked it, but it's like, everybody else is going to like it, and I can see why. So there's that. I have some thoughts on Kirito's and Asuna's relationship, but I feel like we could be talking about that a little later on. Am I right in assuming that, Jay?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So yeah, we can say that, delay that for later. But yeah, so those are the positives, and I think those are pretty clear cut, especially if you're looking at it, I guess, a little bit more critically and like in the way of like not living up to the expectations that you kind of set before it. And again, we are three individually gamers or different kinds of gamers, so we were kind of going into it maybe with high expectations of what it was supposed to be. So I think revisiting again after 10 years is a little bit of the why we do a retrospective anyways, is because in hindsight you can kind of see it more objectively for what it was. And let's move on to I think another positive is a question I asked you guys, is that do you feel if the animation feels old? And of course it's done by A1 Pictures. We've talked about some of their works before. We talked about Onahana last year as well as Sound the Sky last year. But Eric, as a less in-depth viewer of anime, did you notice any critical like animation wonkiness to it, or did it feel as brand new as like something in 2022?
It definitely doesn't feel brand new. Which I feel there's a single studio that is responsible for that. Like UFO Table has, I think that is the main introduction to just how gorgeous things can be animated. But just because it doesn't feel necessarily 2020, I don't. It still doesn't look bad. I mean, like that first boss battle still has a lot going on. The animation, like they clearly put a little bit of time and money into that scene, so there's not a lot of like you can't noticeably see like drops in quality, like say what you could see for like early Naruto when there would be a big fight, and every now and then certain sequences you would be like, wait, why did his face like just disappear? Because they or I think it's not until like late. It's not until like Alfheim that I think I saw some kind of just little tiny dips here and there. Uh, but overall, I would say it's still animated well, even for 2022. Sure, it's not the best, but no, it still looks good.
Yeah,
It looks good enough to draw you in. Maybe my actual like that's my tagline.
Yeah, because again, leading into like what I think we've all said is that this is a very good first anime because it's not over stylized. It's not something that is too jarring to like new anime viewers because it's not like a Studio Trigger or Studio. Let's see, who has another distinct style that would put people off. Even 8-bit.
Who does Mobs? Who does
Mob
sorry
Psycho?
to cut you off. Yeah, who does Mob Psycho?
Mob Psycho is Madhouse. Madhouse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
because that's gorgeous, but it is highly stylized. That would definitely turn people off.
Exactly. So what you're saying, Eric, is like it's very clean, it's very cohesive, it's very just not like minimalistic, but it's like just very clean cut. Like the line work is very sharp and crisp. Even like attention to detail to the environment design is like very high budget. So yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. Sam, you have anything about this?
So generic in a good way?
Generic in the
Honestly,
way that that it doesn't mash up to like the characters moving around the scene. It doesn't seem like they're just cardboard cutouts on a background. So like that. So like generic in the way that it doesn't clash with like emotion.
And I would say like I agree with Martinez Prime here. Yeah, it seems like we're sharing a brain cell today. But yeah, it's not old. It's definitely not new, but it's in that sweet spot where you can still watch it. And all the scenes that are supposed to be fantastical, they still are. And even in the downplaying and relaxing scenes, it's not. You don't see a dip in money if there is one. So they really allocate their resources very well in this series.
All right, perfect. Yeah, because it's not something new to A1 Pictures. Again, they're pretty known for maintaining their budget consistently out through production. So yeah, animation definitely on point. Doesn't feel too old. Maybe just some moments of dropped quality in the second half, but again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But getting on to the next question, because I'm coming up on my section I really want to talk about. But before we get into that, I wanted to ask you guys, what is your favorite moment? Because I completely misremembered something because I've seen the abridged version of the series done by Something Witty Entertainment, and I swore it was the original one, but it's not. In episode 6, Kirito confronts a group of bandits called the Titan's Hand, and in the abridged version, he kills the leader of Titan's Hands, the redheaded warrior, Rosalina or Rosala, one of those names. And he kills her, and I was like, that's my favorite moment of Sword Art Online. That the hero of the story, the protagonist, actually kills someone in a death game. And I was waiting for that moment to come up, and he doesn't kill her. And I was like, oh no, that's in the abridged version. But
yeah, he takes her to jail.
Yeah, he takes her
Yeah,
to
she
jail.
just
Yeah,
goes to
she just
jail.
goes to jail. Yeah, she just goes to jail, and I'm like, oh, boo. But yeah, wanted to talk about your guys' favorite moment because I'm actually having trouble trying to pin down one. So I want to hear what your favorite moments were. So Sam, can you tell me specifically what is your favorite moment?
It was when you first mentioned it, my first thought was the I think it was Shiny Eyes. It was the blue demon at first, just because of how iconic it is. I mean, because in the second half of the first season, we see an homage to Shiny Eyes, and but like looking back at the scene, it's it was impactful, but to me, not as impactful as the very first boss fight with I forgot his name, so I'm going to call him Kangaroo Monster, but with Joey the Kangaroo Monster, and mainly because with that fight, it's everything that Sword Art is supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be an MMO where you have to work in tandem with other players. And in my opinion, it is probably the best scene that we've seen Kirito work in unison with Asuna, and they're both holding their weight. In uh, the other scene that I was talking about with Shiny Eyes, we see them work in tandem, but near the end of the fight, we see Kirito get the typical shonen pro tag boost. Whereas
Hmm.
in the fight with Joey the Kangaroo, they're on equal footing and both of their skills are on display. One doesn't overshadow the other, they completely complement each other. And so that's why that scene is my favorite moment.
And earnest in your favoriteness of it. So Eric, how about you? Do you have a favorite moment that stands out to you? Like,
We are sharing way more than just a brain cell. Shoot, because for me it is that first boss battle for all the reasons that you said. Like you actually get to see a team of players beat this boss. They're like, yes, Kirito gets like the final hit, like he does like the final strike, and, but he only gets to that point because of the teamwork that got them to that point. And we also see Kirito's counter of another beta tester, which I don't know if we've said that's why Kirito is better than all the other players because he was in the beta.
Mm-hmm.
And we see like the other beta tester fail because he gets too cocky um, in his understanding of the game. Which I'll be honest, that part to me totally falls flat. Like I don't think they handle it well. But even still, because of that teamwork, and especially because of the teamwork with Kirito and Asuna, like man, like you just feel their energy and how they are working together for this one goal. And for me, when Kirito makes that final strike, that is like the best scream in all of anime. I know that like for some people it's DBZ, some people it's Attack on Titan, but for me, like even watching it, even for the rewatch that I just did, like his scream there in Japanese, not in English, because I actually rewatched in English, and boy, don't do that.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Don't watch. If you like the dub, you like the sub. I don't really care, but for this one, no, stay away from the dub. I beg of you. But that is like the best scream in anime because you just feel him being like, I am not going to die in this game. We are not going to lose. I'm going to take this, like all of this emotion that I have, and it is going into this final swing, and I'm going to beat this boss. You just get that feeling, and just like Sam said, like you don't really get that with the other bosses because yeah, shonen protagonist mode gets flicked on. Like he gets like God mode always just gets turned on when it needs to be. Sometimes literally, uh, but you don't have that here. You just have gamers, and they're beating a first boss.
right, yeah, that's fair. So I'm glad I'm against you two sharing the brain cell. But it is a weird thing because my favorite scene is his fight against Heathcliff.
Mm, the duel or like
The
the
duel.
final fight?
Oh yeah, the duel.
Okay.
So this is an episode. Oh wow, I didn't write it down.
I think it's 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure because it's after Blue Eyes.
Right.
that they-
Yeah,
It
it
is,
is
yeah.
after Blue Eyes.
So yeah, this is a fight where, for me specifically, is because Heathcliff is, the idea of why solo players become guild leaders is that they know that if they are just like assault team members or on the front lines of it, because they call it the front lines of the assault team for people clearing floors. But yeah, it's a game that needs leadership, and I very much liked Kirito's cockiness of like, oh yeah, I can take out this guy. I've killed a number of monsters. I'm OG. I'm the main character, protagonist, plot armor, and of course I'm going to win this fight. I'm going to take down this elderly gentleman and his giant cross shield, Templar shield. And I love Heathcliff's design. Like, he's just fully clad in armor, and he has the, like I said, Templar shield, but then he has a sweet broadsword. Not broadsword. What kind of sword is that? It's like not a rapier either. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to think of my sword history.
Broadsword is. I think that is a generic enough term that at least if you've played an RPG, you know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. It's not the guts kind of great sword. It's a broadsword. But I was trying to think of something specifically to the medieval period. But anyways, I'm getting nerdy about swords. But yeah, it is a.
His design reminds me of Exia from Gundam 00, where it has like the shield and like the sword on the end. Like, I think that's like you were saying, just like how cool his design was. And I'm like, why am I attracted to his design? I'm like, he reminds me of a Gundam. It's like, oh, he's a Gundam in player form.
Yeah, which makes sense to his play style because he's a leader. He's the most important. He's the king. Thinking about warfare in chess terms, that of course I wouldn't go around wearing a coat and leather boots and looks like an edgelord. I'm literally a commander of an army.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so I like that fight because it's such, I guess, a philosophical debate between two fighters, and I always like that when it comes down to my sword fighting scenes. But it kind of gets underplayed when the kind of twist to Heathcliff's character. But anyways, I think that's my favorite moment, just because at the moment I didn't know, I didn't know that
we didn't know what we didn't know at that point. Yeah.
So it was just Kirito getting outplayed. Exactly.
Yes.
Hacks.
Yeah. Like we're just like, oh man, Heathcliff's just that good, and then like 2 episodes later, you're like, oh, he just cheated. Okay.
Yeah, I would say like you do get hints of it in the fight, like in that rewatch. I'm like, oh, this is why that happened in the fight.
Yeah.
Because like they do hint at it, but it's still a good turn.
Yeah, it's a good turn. Yeah. So speaking to just close off the positives and to just say that one, just to summarize, like my 2 pages of notes about all the good things about SAO is that it has a good tonal and direction to it. It's bingeable, it has like plot variety. Just speaking to the first half of the season 1, and then Boy Gets the Girl in episode 10 is a good first anime watch if you don't have much experience with anime. And Studio A1 Pictures did a lot of creative use in like its background design as well as its character design, making it unique from other properties, as well as like clear-cut line art, as well as like vibrant color use. So I would say those are all the positives why you would recommend it. And now to the later half of our discussion, which I've been kind of waiting for, is the question is that does SAO deserve the hate that it receives? I have 6 pages of negatives. So to summarize, just a big summarization is SAO is hot garbage. That to be
it is
not to be blunt. No, I guess I'm being blunt about it by saying it's garbage. But there is so much to talk about. Yeah, there's just so much to rag on it about. But yeah.
Before we actually like dive off that cliff, I want to make one observation, and that is that all of our conversation up until this point, when we're talking about the positives, basically deals with Aincrad. None of it is with Alfheim. and I know that is part of what we're going to get into when we go into the negatives. But I will give just a quick little like footnote of the battle with Kirito and the General of the Blazing Flame in Alfheim is actually a very good, is like a
Oh,
great fight because there's no protagonist plot armor. We know why he is able to win that battle because he had these skills that he learned earlier in the series. So I'll give that little footnote before we
mhm.
like dive straight into the abyss of how bad this show is.
I would also like to give like one other footnote too, because I mentioned earlier the the slice of lifeiness in Aincrad. I didn't like. I liked in Alfheim that it felt like it had more of a linear story and a linear
Mm-hmm.
direction in that
There's
regard.
one quest we are trying to complete.
Yeah, and
Mm.
I felt like that's why I preferred the storytelling in Alfheim more than Ironclad because in
Mm-hmm.
Ironclad, you know, everyone's trying to beat the game, but then we stop, we smell the roses, things like that. It's like okay, that's cool, but
Right,
in my mind, it's like I want death game stuff. What's going on? But I
right.
get that in Alfheim where it's like save the princess, and we're always working to save the princess, and there is a bit of variety along the way, but we still have that linear
Yeah.
aspect to it. So that's one positive that I liked with Alfheim.
But kind of back to Jay, your question was like, what does it deserve the hate?
Right. Yeah, that's the main question. Yeah.
It deserves the hate. Like the actual story that we get into at the on the second half, and even the first half. So like throughout the first season, it's just cliche. Like it is the same, shonen protagonist like has to be the big bad. There's no like there's really no character progression. There is character regression, like massive character regression from Asuna in the second half, where she just gets thrown in the refrigerator. Um, and well, I guess I'll just say she gets thrown in the bird cage. I'll adapt that trope name. Um, to where her agency is completely removed. Like where we're praising the first boss battle because she's on par with Kirito, and like that's why that relationship I think feels so natural because they're equals. Like sure, Kirito is this like big bad beater, but Asuna's over here like as one of the generals of the main frontline force. Like she is a badass on her own right, and then they just say nope, we can't have a strong female protagonist taking the spotlight away from our man in black here, and just completely cut her lights out. The just blatant like sexual assault and rapiness of the second half of season one is one of the reasons that I think this series gets so much deserved hate because it is so poorly done, so completely unnecessary to kind of add in, I guess, tension and a clock in some way. Um, and yeah, like that variety that I know that I said you sold me on as being a positive, and I'm still sold on it, but it's also disjointed and rushed. You never actually get to really live in any of the consequences of that variety. It's there and boom, it's gone. Even with that suicide scene from episode 3, like yes, it's shot very well and all of this, but you never actually get to like live in that moment. You never actually get any kind of discussion around that or any time to really consider like, okay, yeah, no, this can literally like lead people into thinking honestly just dying is better than staying in this world. Like we're presented with these concepts but we never get a resolution, we never get like any actual discussion on them. They're just like thrown in our face to be like, oh hey, look at the topics that we're covering, and then nothing. Yeah, I could keep going, but like there's my like quick ish of why yes, it definitely deserves some hate, a
Uh,
lot of hate.
do you mind if I jump in, Jay, or did you want to keep going?
Oh yeah, I can. We can break this down a little bit more because there's just so much to not rag on it, but to be justified in hating it properly, because one, you did mention something, so maybe we can talk about the most controversial thing. Not even controversial. It's just like why it was okay. So one, SAO recently got unbanned in China. So in 2020, it
was
was
banned?
unbanned from China. So
Oh wow.
and the reason why it was put on the ban list was for promoting child pornography. And after coming back to watching this after 10 years, I was like, oh, I see it now. I guess maybe because I'm 10 years older and I didn't see it at the time really, or I just kind of wrote it off as, oh, just anime doing anime stuff. But yeah, it's very.
Asuna is underage and she is sexually assaulted multiple times by multiple men, both virtually and in the real world.
Yes, like which again can be covered very intellectually, like significantly in the narrative, but for it's just shock value and adding evilness for no thought out,
no reason whatsoever.
As you already know, so the second villain in the first season is Sugu, and he's just so it's part of the whole Japanese culture of is it wife raising, but basically marrying a younger woman and then raising her to be the woman that you want her to be.
Oh, so like grooming.
Grooming. Thank you, grooming. Yeah, but also he's going to marry her while she's still in a coma. So there's always already this layer of sleaziness to his character. But then you have moments of like a close up on his lips as he does that weird, ugly bastard kind of licking.
Lip
it's like, okay, I know exactly what character this is. I don't know it. I don't need to know anything else. But yeah, then at the last moment, there's this very gratuitous sexual assault scene, and there's a tentacle scene earlier in the season as well, which is like unnecessary because it could have just been guards.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about the tentacle scene.
Yes, everyone forgets about the tentacle scene. But yeah, it's not like, even to break down that scene even more, it's not even that it's just explicit sexual assault. It's that it's shot in a way that makes you look at it in a very odd kind of voyeuristic kind of way. And I'm like, who's directing this now? After I kind of congratulated the first half of being like well directed. I was like, is it a new director? Which I didn't look up. I didn't have the foresight to look it up.
I mean, it's the character design. Even these are the first human characters that we see not be human, and they have tentacles. And it literally is like, oh, they are not human just so that we can have a tentacle rape scene,
right?
Like because they're the only humans that aren't humanoid creatures in either of the games.
That's
everyone
is
a human except these two scientists that are working with Suga, and they just happen to be slimy tentacle rape monsters.
Exactly.
Like, come on.
So like you can work into the narrative like that scene where it's just guards. It's just like people working for Suga. Even you see,
we're scientists. Like,
just scientists. Yeah, just other characters, player characters. It's just like, you know, then you want to get into this area of rewriting it, and it's like, okay, I don't want to go into that direction. But yeah, Reki Kawahara is just, he writes misogyny, he writes the sexual
voyeurism,
like looking at these girls in a very sexual way. Even with his sister, again, in the second part of the season, is that she gets ogled by the camera out the wazoo, and that's really all she has to her character, other than she wants to sleep with her brother as well. It's like,
bro,
where did this come from? But Sam, let me hear from you, because I can go on to 3 different pages from this direction.
I want to tack on a point that Martinez Prime had mentioned earlier about not seeing or reveling in the results of some action. So he had mentioned how we had a mass self-deletion scene, right? Or there was a mention of it, right? A mass exodus. And one thing that pissed me off was we're in Alfheim, right? And I can't remember who it was. I think it was Kirito, or it was either Kirito, Asuna, or one of the other old SAO players, where they were like, oh yeah, do you remember that time when just like everybody just passed out and we didn't know what happened? I'm like, what? That happened? Like, it was just like a giant moment like that, right? Like, you're in this death game and you're adventuring with people, and then all of a sudden they just drop to the floor. They don't die. They don't wake up. you're not gonna show that to us? What is this? It's just like that. It's just like exploring like one of those things. It's like, oh, it's like that was them like moving our bodies to the hospital. It's like, okay, cool, but that would have been nice to see you guys grow from that. And going back to a little bit of Kirito and Asuna, you had mentioned Eric that their relationship seemed natural, and I would say yes and no, like in the progression, because in the beginning and his interaction with her and her becoming the general, yes, that was a natural progression. But then their romance after that, it seemed it seemed unnatural to me in the sense that because before like they started their romance, right? We see them in a war room making plans, and Asuna, being the badass general that she is, she's making a tough call in wanting to sacrifice NPCs, and Kirito trying to still hold his values and not have the game change him. He doesn't want to sacrifice NPCs despite them not being actually people. Like, I'm mad that we didn't get to see how that fight ensued, because apparently that was one of their hardest fights. And not only that, but somehow Asuna got enough respect for Kirito to go and lay in the sun when she was chastising him about laying in the sun not 5 minutes before. So it's just like, what happened? I missed some character development where they were able to influence one another in this great cataclysmic battle, right? That was sort of hyped up, and it's just brushed aside.
No, that is a great point. You were right on that. Yeah.
Aside from that, like, it was very weird how they had the sister over sexualize Kirito, especially it was weird that they made her a gamer, because you would think that seeing her close relative, like her brother, get stuck in a game, comatose, and not come out, you would think that she would be emotionally scarred from video games or from wanting to use video games. I guess it's a testament to how resilient children can be, but still, it's like a knee-jerk reaction. It's like, would that really happen though? Would she really be okay with going into VR to begin with?
But Sam, she wanted to be closer and understand her fake brother. So of course she's going to put on the headgear or nerve gear or whatever version she had. While he's still comatose in the hospital also, like, because she starts gaming while he's an SAO.
Upon reviewing the second time, like seeing her wantingness for his affection, or at least his approval, like it was natural, right? It was understandable, because like up to that point he was standoffish. She didn't know why. I guess maybe they could have been like, it's a child trying to process their feelings, and so it's like, oh, so now that I know that he's not my brother, like, then that must mean that like it would sort of like invite romance, but he's still her cousin, so why would that be okay? I guess like maybe if he's like a distant cousin, but still it's just like murky Alabama territory here. But I would say like it was good seeing him and her, or at least him trying to reconcile her feelings with her. Like that moment where he hops out and he tries to sit and, or at least like try to reach with her, or not reach with her, but like reach to her emotionally. That was like him trying to reconcile her feelings. I did like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was well done.
You really have to consider that, well, just specifically to Japanese culture, is that that's with inside their laws that you can marry your cousin. So, like, we call it incest, but, that's a foreigner perception of the idea, because it's in their marriage laws that as long as your first cousin, that as long as your second cousins, I believe, I think you have to be one removed away from the main family. Again, that's going back to like the historical sense of the imperial.
Oh no, and I think even in Alabama as well, it's like as long as it's like second cousin or something like that too. But like it's never really stated. It's just like, oh, he's my cousin. But I guess it's assumed since she's began harboring those feelings, but it's not really explicit. It's just the catch-all cousin term.
Yeah, because it doesn't have to be explained to Japanese audiences. They would have to go out of their way to explain it to foreign audiences, which again, SAO is popular, but it's always been a niche thing inside of the US because of gamer culture being a niche thing by itself. And going back again to 2012, where like esports was blowing up, as well as League of Legends was taking over like the WoW kind of viewership, becoming like the most popular PC game being played at the time. Actually, Eric, when did you actually start playing League?
2015-ish, I think. So a couple years after it was released.
Okay, so you got up on the wave after all the hype. All right, cool. So, man, wow, so much to talk about. But there is this clear sense to me that, well, there's problems with the first half. I think what Sam said is very true, is that there does seem to be this pacing issue where all the Aincrad stuff could be handled inside of a 24 episode season.
Definitely.
It needed a lot.
It could
of
have been its own
fleshiness.
season, yeah.
Yeah, like maybe 2 episodes or 3 episodes with the Moonlit Cat, so you actually felt that emotional attachment to when they actually die. And then same thing with like fleshing out the romance of those two, because a lot of things are just cut or understood. Even like their dealing with Yui, which we haven't even mentioned, that they get a kid. They get a kid during the last episode or before the previous episode of the first half. And then, which is weird because the first half of the season has this pacing issue. And then the second half of the season has a pacing issue because there's not enough to fill the 12 episodes, because very much what...
Well, they don't get 12 episodes. So the Land of the Fairies starts at 16. So they don't even get 10 because they don't actually end Aincrad until the 14th episode, and that is 100% the reason why like pacing is such an issue on both halves. First part is like we jump like 50 floors or some junk in 5 episodes, and then in the second half, well, they only have 9 episodes to not only sell you on Alfheim but also sell you on the real world and all of this cousin romance. And I mean, they have to give the Dead or Alive volleyball animation team like all of their moments of seeing all the titties go bounce. Like,
oh my god, the boob physics in Alfheim.
yeah, it's so frustrating because we don't get that in the first one. Like Asuna's character design is not that, and then all of a sudden it is.
Was she wearing armor in Aincrad?
No, she's not. She's just wearing a dress in the first. Like,
oh my goodness.
And you literally like so when they are in their little romance and find Yui and all this kind of stuff, she's just in a sweater, and like yes, she's a feminine model, so she has like a bust line, but it's nothing insane. But then you jump to Alfheim, and clearly Sugu like turned up her slider and gave her just
all the milk,
all of it, and I'm just like, bro, oh my god, that. There's a lot wrong with this show, but the way that they treat Asuna and just the toxic masculinity and like Jay was saying about the writer, like just the misogyny is that boils me so much.
Grind your gears.
Yeah. Sorry, Jay. Go ahead. You were talking about pacing.
Oh yeah, that's fine. But that's like again, it's like so much to talk about. It's just like it's so interesting again to say like obviously you can point out the. Well, it's not obvious that you can put out the good things, but it does very much feel like bring up one of your favorite animes, Eric, is like Fullmetal Alchemist. Where do you point out the negative things in Fullmetal Alchemist? And for me, I always thought that the romance between Ed and Winry could have been developed a lot faster, and same thing,
100%.
Getting the girl, I think Ed deserved the girl a lot sooner than he did get her at like the last episode. But pointing out the negatives of SAO is so obvious. It's like redundant inside of itself. It's like a meme inside of a meme to talk about how terribly written SAO is. But to just add on to the conversation that I like to just point out is that, wow, just how the characters are not written at all And it's so weird. Like
Yeah.
they're just tools. They're not even like cardboard would have
They
more
might as well
personalities.
all be NPCs.
Right, which I think does come through in like the next season, actually Sword Art Online 2, because in that Kirito has some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, but he doesn't in this one, which I thought was like, how do you go into a new game with the same VR kind of setup, but not have post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, but then have it in the sequel series to this? And it's so oddly that that's what his character was missing, because he doesn't learn anything. Asuna doesn't grow. Nope. She's in a cage. She's Princess Peach. He doesn't do anything.
I think the lack of PTSD, because I would say now that you mention that, Jay, it's understandable that with Alfheim he doesn't have the PTSD because he has that laser focus on trying to save the Asuna. He doesn't have time to really delve into it. And I would say, like, if anything, it might have seeped out when that homage to Blue Eyes came out, when he just raged against those other characters. And like those moments of rage were probably his PTSD slipping out. But now that you mention it, he should have experienced PTSD during the Gun Gale season, because
he did.
Everything was he did. I don't remember.
That's what I was talking about. Sort of.
Okay. I thought you were talking about Alcilization. I didn't know you were talking about Gun Gale.
But even still, I don't think it's well. We're not necessarily talking about season 2, but even still, like, I don't think the PTSD is really handled wonderfully in that. At least it's there, but and Sam, like, I see your point of, I have this goal. I have to save my woman. I got to get her out of the bird cage. So I can't have my mental breaking on me. And we see, I don't know. We'll talk about that part with the ending, whether it's satisfying or not. So.
That's a rewrite issue, and again, it's just like something I just noticed. It's like, yeah, you talk about it in the following season, but not in literally the next iteration of your series. Where, yeah, sure, he might be laser focused, but also he's taking time to dance with his sister and do all these side quests. He does some side quests.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, let me handle this confrontation between these people in factions that don't really matter to me, but I'm trying to save my woman.
Oh, but it should have.
Alright, so obviously the negatives, we can talk hours and hours about it, but I did want to focus on like one negative that I think gets overlooked, and I think Sam brought this up earlier, is that this is an anime not really for gamers. So the genre it does fall into, or at least it says it falls into, is the MMORPG, but the way that it basically represents that kind of gaming is very lackluster. It's very veiled behind things that you wouldn't expect to see, because like as someone that's gotten into Elden Ring recently, I'm like, okay, I get why your screen can get like overtaxed with information and dialogue and text box and menus. When you look at how the menu system in Sword Art Online is kind of structured, it's like nested menu bars. And I know it's a very trivial thing to point out, but it's just like one of those things of Reki Kawahara just didn't know what he was doing. Like, he's just a straight up bad writer, and it's amazing to me that he did so many things that I talked about, like the positives, just so well, like you can get attached to it, but when you dive deep into it, it's a terrible game, it's a terrible anime. So, Eric, can you talk about at least like some of the features that you see that make a game playable from the interface to...
and why this one would not be? First off, 100% what you just said. The nested menus is such a classic JRPG trope of like that blue, that sea of blue menus. It is such a not even JRPG, but just Japanese game. Because Resident Evil is kind of the same way, and just like clunky menu systems. But like that blue, I think, is supposed to evoke, like old Final Fantasy vibes, kind of a thing. So yeah, if this was an actual game, you could not play it. Like the leveling, and my main one is the leveling. It makes no sense to me how players level in Aincrad or in Alfheim, because you can level through combat and killing mobs. Duh, that's how we do it. However, you can level through items as well, but there's also a limited amount of mobs that you can level through, so not everyone can ever level to the same level as everyone else. Because they always talk about like, oh, well, these people have the best hunting grounds. Like, okay, but you spent 2 years in this
Yeah.
game. If you spent 2 years killing wolves, you'd still get to a high level. Like, yeah, it just takes longer. I understand that, but what else are you gonna do? Um, so yeah, the leveling in SAO is terrible, but then the leveling in Alfheim doesn't make sense because it's supposed to be based on your actual prowess and your skills, and the more you do stuff, the better you are in the game. So I would, but it's also based on your physical attributes. So if you're physically fit in the real world, then you're able to, show that off in Alfheim. But and this is another issue with the writing, but Alfheim is based off of SAO's architecture, but Alfheim comes out during SAO because at one point his cousin, sister, whatever, says that she's been playing for a year. So it comes out while the SAO tragedy has happened. So basically, Alfheim comes out a year after SAO does. Kirito's been in SAO for 2 years, hard grinding, like hard ass grinding beyond what anybody else is doing. But then he comes into Alfheim, and yeah, he's really strong, but he's not OP. He does not have an extra year's worth of stats. So like, what is your actual leveling system in either of these games? Like, I don't know where your progression lies. Um, the items, uh, the items suck in SAO because yeah, he like there's no, I don't know, he wears that same cloak that he gets on level 1. And if anybody's played a video game, if you're still wearing the armor that you get from level 1, come level 90 or 100, like what are you doing? I'm sorry, that's not how games work. Yeah, just the leveling, the item system is terrible. The skill system seems questionable at best. Like, Kirito is the only double-handed swordsman in all of SAO. So there's hidden skills. Does everybody get that? Is that just a, hey, you were a beta tester, so you get a hidden skill? Like, the quests, there aren't any that you can really tell because there's no quest markers. There's no. We're about to talk about it. So yeah, I'm gonna stop there because we're about to. Yeah, we're gonna talk about like a good version of what this game should have been.
Okay, good. So that rolls into my next question, but just to summarize, because I know Sam's a gamer too, but to specifically talk about this kind of genre is because there are like set rules as gamers we're supposed to know and like identify with. Like, you know that one player is a tank, one player is a healer, one player is the damage dealer. But in SAO, you only have one type of class to play because it prioritizes and rewards that kind of player. And if you're playing in a death game, maybe you should have healers, maybe you should have tanks. And the only thing that would make you a tank is like Heathcliff just having a shield. And that's the only distinction that SAO or Replicard Horror kind of makes for, interesting gameplay. So, Sam, kind of parallel into the next question, you can talk about your gaming experience as well, but have you any familiarity with solo leveling? And do you feel like it's a better representation of our kind of mentality as gamers, I guess, or the gaming genre?
Oh, I definitely believe so. And I've been wanting to look into solo leveling myself off and on whenever I'm at Books A Million. And I'm like, oh, there's solo leveling I heard so much about. And then I remember it's like, oh, I can read it online free legally. So I don't know if I need to pay for this. And then you brought it up as a question prompt. So it made me go and read it. And I would say it is a proper representation of gamer culture, mainly because of what we've said or mentioned earlier. You and Eric have both mentioned that there are different quote unquote quests with at least represented in Sword Art. However, they're not quests; they are self-imposed actions. When we talk about the fishing or the murder mystery that Asuna and Kirito go on, those are all self-imposed. They aren't required by the game. The only things that are quote unquote quests, aside from beating floor bosses that we've seen, is probably when he had to go and fight the Kraid's Santa to find that super secret item. And even then, it was just a go to this location and beat this boss. It's like there's nothing much more to it than that. However, in solo leveling, we see actual things that are needed in gameplay. Like they go into a dungeon room and you have to solve the puzzle within the room. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say another work that's similar to it, or that would be more considered, that would be considered more of a gamer anime, would be Don Machi. Like, is it wrong to pick up girls in a dungeon? It's a fantasy world, but the way that they play things, it's basically guilds trying to build themselves up and uh, every now and then go into a tower to beat monsters, but come back and build up your guild. And I would say even Excel World does the gaming aspects a little bit better. But just to go back to solo leveling, it reminded me of my time playing Destiny 2. It's funny as well because I like to play games by myself. I don't like to go online and play with other people. I like to enjoy the story by myself. But when I play with Destiny 2, I realize just how dependent you are on your team. Like I was like, oh, in Destiny, I'll just like solo and I'll gain my levels on my own. I don't need nobody. It's like, no, for me to even get moderately good, I needed to do quests where I had other people that played in different playing styles. And you get that in solo leveling. What you mentioned earlier, you have those different classes that focus on different attributes that can play defense, that can heal, that can attack all simultaneously. Whereas in Sword Art Online, it's just okay, I have this sword, I have this axe. Let's go beat this monster up. That sort of thing. And there's just no real strategy in how to overcome their obstacles in that game.
And not to write it off as solo leveling, but
Mhm.
solo leveling for me is like if I was going to sell it to someone, it's like SAO plus Darker Than Black plus One Punch Man. And Eric, do you feel like that's a accurate description?
I think that is it's not as tongue in cheek as One Punch Man because it certainly is not trying to make a comment on like the overpowered protagonist. But yes, that is a great way to kind of quickly give somebody like some pieces to put together to figure out solo leveling.
Right. So, what are your like thoughts, or how do you compare SAO to solo leveling?
Oh, it's not even a comparison. That's not fair. Like literally, like Sung Jin Woo would see Kirito and would literally just like summon a basic soldier to be like, "Go get rid of this for me. I don't have time." But in seriousness, like the difference, I think the main two differences for why solo leveling gets the gaming RPG aspect right compared to Sword Art is progression. Well, I guess three things: progression, tension, and game systems. So, like, we actually see the progression for Jinwoo in solo leveling. Like, he is the world's weakest hunter, but he's our main character, so of course he has to get a power up. But it's not an instant thing. He's not just Joey Badass over here after he gets the player power, quote unquote. I mean, I don't want to spoil too much into it, but yeah, he still has to level up, and we see that, and we see the struggle, and we see that like every time he comes to a new boss, like it doesn't matter how much he's leveled up, he still has to like grit and try and persevere through like difficult battles. For Kirito, like, yeah, he does that, but we never see how he gets there. We just see the big boss fights, and just somehow he's leveled enough to magically make it happen, to make it work. Excuse me, to make it work. There's not really an actual progression that we see for Kirito. Like we see him in the first boss fight, and then it's just like, oh yeah, I'm also just way stronger than everybody else could ever hope to be. It's like, but how? Like, this isn't about beta testing anymore, because I literally think it's the fourth episode, we're far past the point where the beta testers had ever seen anything.
Mm-hmm.
So he couldn't possibly have extra knowledge. He can't be the only good gamer in that entire population. So yeah, we see that progression, which is so important for solo leveling, because it also adds to the tension. There's not really ever tension in SAO, I don't feel, or even in Alfheim. And part of that, I guess, is because, yeah, we know he's going to get out of the game. But even in like the final battles, like, you're just like, bro, you're going to win. Something's going to happen. He gets defeated in both of the final battles, but then magic, I'm the protagonist, I win. Like some BS, literally just BS. Like, I'm just going to win because I have to for the plot to progress. Where in solo leveling, like, he wins because he grits, and he figures something out on a strategy that he can do with his abilities, and how he can work those abilities together to beat these bosses, and how his focus on strength in the first part, like, he was able to beat the first like major boss that he fights because, man, I put all of my stuff into strength. How can I use that to my advantage? Oh, I can do this. And then later on, he's like, man, strength isn't getting it for me. I need to kind of respec a little bit and make sure that I'm still really fast and can keep up with these enemies. And then it's like, damn, I've really neglected my mana pool. Like, I should have put more points into intelligence and made sure that I can, use my skills more often, because when they run out, I'm at a huge disadvantage. Like, there's a progression, there's a thought process that makes sense, in both a gamer aspect and even in just a anime aspect. I know it's not an anime yet, but like, it just makes sense. Whereas here, Kirito's just like, but what if I swing my sword? Like, and what if I had two of them? Like that, it felt, the whole like two sword thing felt very Kenpachi Bleach. But what if I use two hands? Then I increase the power, which technically is true. Like, if you use two hands, you can greatly increase the power of a sword swing. But it's done in just such a comical way, there and here, that you're just like, okay, that's just anime BS that you're using. And then, yeah, game systems, which Sam touched on a little bit of, there's actual quests that he goes on, and they're still natural quests. It's not like he goes to an NPC, which technically don't exist in his world, but like, he's given quests naturally as he travels the map, quote unquote, you would say, of his life, and they just kind of pop up. And yeah, whereas all the questing, quote unquote, again, on SAO doesn't exist. Alfheim, his quest isn't game related. It's personal, of save Asuna, but it tangentially is the same as the overall game quest of get to the top of the world tree, which you can only do if you unite all of the races, which he doesn't do. He only unites two of them, technically, because uniting two races is the same thing as uniting all five. But whatever. Yeah, go read Solo Leveling. If you ever are gonna just like go watch SAO, just go read Solo Leveling instead. It'll just have a better time.
What a transition to our last question. That is I think, resounding reburied from all of us. So, as always, when we talk about 10-year discussion of the anime, we ask the question is it worth recommending to people to resurrect it, or do we just leave it reburied in the past where it belongs, down 6 feet under the ground? But I believe that's a reburied from all of us.
It's just interesting because, like, talking about this, right, all throughout especially the beginning part of this podcast, we were saying how it was a great intro anime. So I'm not sure, so I'm sort of just hesitant to say rebury, because, like, at least to have a good intro anime out there, or at least what should be considered the standard, because it's not bad, but it's not spectacular. It's just a good intro anime. So I don't know if it needs to be resurrected on that basis or not.
But do you think that there are other anime that you can get kind of the same concepts from that just do it better?
Oh yeah, no. Excel World.
I don't know what those were. Oh, well, yeah. And I guess that's my thought for that, because I kind of feel I feel the same as you. Is like it is a good intro anime because it throws so many concepts and tropes and things that you need to just be okay with in order to really like start diving deeper and deeper and deeper into anime. But there's just stuff that does it better. Whether that comes to like my mind, since I'm not quite as versed in, I guess, the different genres, but yeah, there's better. Like go watch like Full Metal Alchemist, or I don't know.
Oh, you're one of those people.
I don't know. Well, I'm actually I don't actually think FMA is a great intro, even though I know that was definitely a lot of people's intro to anime. I don't think it actually. You have to accept a lot of anime stuff right off the bat in order to really dive into that. But yeah, I feel like there's better right. Like you can get all of the stuff you have in SAO without all of the misogyny, without all the rape, without all of the terrible and non-existent character progression, without the just tacked on deep philosophical issues of like suicide and murder, which that's something we didn't even really touch on. Like there are players that literally just go around
that went around
other players in SAO just to murder them, and like but I think the reason that we don't talk about it is that the show doesn't really talk about it either. Like it happens, we get like these teases of the Laughing Coffin Guild, and like, oh, they must be like the real big bad that we have to fight because they're just player murderers. And it's like, no, they show up and then they're gone, and then they come back in SAO2.
And that's like another thing too, right? Because like they kill people in the game, you go back into the real world talking about the consequences. What happens to them?
Yes,
they killed people. Like, do they get tried? Does nobody talk about them? And I think
no one does talk about it.
I think they even come back. I think the Laughing Coffin even does come back in Gun Gale, but I would have to rewatch it. But
no, they do 100%. Like the antagonist there has the Laughing Coffin tattoo, and that's kind of that's some of the PTSD that we get from Kirito in Gun Gale is that he sees the tattoo and connects Laughing Coffin with and it triggers him, and it triggers him in such a garbage way because we never got any payoff for that guild other than, hey, look, they're evil people who do evil stuff.
Right. So like I was saying, there's like, I mean, we could go episode by episode. We could do a commentary of the things that we missed out on, and things like just like I put a little paragraph in my notes of like just the character of Sachi, and she says the line, "I'm afraid to die."
Oh yeah,
I'm afraid to die, and I'm like, yeah, hello, you're in a death game with a lot of other people that are afraid to die. That's not a real fear. I mean, it's a real fear, but it's a fear that doesn't make you special. So why should I care about you specifically? But that's a lot of things to talk about. But I think that's a resounding reburied, unless there was a strong feeling to resurrect it just by its first anime, I guess, vibes to it. But again, I think things like the sexual assault kind of precludes it from that.
Yeah, sort of negates that.
Underage sexual assault too. I guess we do need to be clear that like Asuna is, at least to an American audience, underage.
Exactly, yeah. Prepubescence, yeah, for sure. So I think that's going to bring it into our discussion of this 10-year review of Sword Art Online, because I still have like 2 pages of unspoken notes, but that's okay. We'll talk about it post-episode so I can share my thoughts. But yeah, Eric, thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad that we got connected and we could do this, and maybe we'll come back for Psychopaths later this year because we'll be talking about that, and that's one of my defining anime, so I have lots to say about that. But thank you so much for coming on and making time.
Oh man, thank y'all for kind of working with me on the schedule of a dad. Like I just appreciate kind of y'all's flexibility, and like I said at the start, like I was excited to do this, and yeah, I would love to come back for future episodes and kind of talk, especially Psychopaths like that. Even though it didn't make my 9, like that is still...
It's an honorable mention.
That is it. Literally in my list, I have a few honorable mentions, like a Mushishi monster, and yeah, Psychopaths is one.
Obviously, that brings a close to the episode. So, Sam, you got the closing. So, what do you have for us?
Yes, so I know, like, after watching SAO, it reminded me like how much I have relished in the catchphrases in back in the day. So I feel like the next time that I'm gonna go online, I'm gonna say next time I'm gonna go on, I'm gonna say Jack in Kirito, the Black Knight, power up.